Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. I know you use this video to fall asleep. If you enjoy our stories, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what city are you watching? I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, let's dive in. The building had no name. 37 floors of steel and glass that somehow managed to blend into the cityscape despite its imposing height. I'd walked past it hundreds of times on my way to my old job at the insurance firm, never noticing the discreet brass plaque beside the revolving doors that simply read Meridian Services. The interview invitation had arrived 3 days after I'd been laid off. No return address, just expensive stationery with embossed letterhead and a time. Tuesday, 3:33 p.m., floor 23. The salary figure mentioned in the brief letter had made my hands shake. 6 figures plus benefits. For what exactly remained unclear. Administrative coordination, the woman across from me explained. Her name was Ms. Chen, though something about her smile suggested that might not be entirely true. She was ageless in that way some people managed, could have been 35 or 55. Her office overlooked the city, but somehow the view seemed muted, as if the windows filtered out more than just UV rays. The position requires discretion, she continued, sliding a contract across the mahogany desk. Our clientele values privacy above all else. You would be what we call a handler. Handler of what? Communications, scheduling, the usual administrative tasks. Her fingers drummed silently against the desk surface. Though I should mention, Mr. Williams, that once you begin, the work can be consuming. Our previous handler unfortunately had to take extended leave. I didn't ask what that meant. The salary figure glowed in my mind like a beacon. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and my savings account was hemorrhaging money. When would I start? Immediately. She produced a key from her desk drawer, an old-fashioned brass key that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Floor 37. You'll be working alone up there. More private. I signed without reading the fine print. First mistake. The elevator climbed with unusual slowness, each floor marked by a soft chime that seemed to echo longer than it should. By the time I reached 37, my ears had popped twice. The floor was a single, vast office space with floor-to-ceiling windows on all sides. In the center sat an antique wooden desk with a computer so old it still had a tower unit. No other furniture. No other employees, just me, the desk, and the unsettling sense that something was watching from the corners where the afternoon shadows pooled too deeply. A manila folder waited on the desk, labeled in precise handwriting, for the attention of the handler, Priority Alpha. Inside, a single sheet of paper with a list typed in an old-fashioned courier font. Handler Protocols. Mandatory compliance. Never acknowledge the sounds from the walls. They are not there. All communications with the principal must be logged verbatim. No paraphrasing. Coffee must be prepared at exactly 4:44 p.m. daily. 2 sugars, no cream. Place on northwest corner of desk. Do not look directly at the principal during meetings. Maintain eye contact with the space 6 inches to the left of where you think their head should be. If the principal asks about your family, always respond, "They are well," and send their regards. Never deviate from this phrasing. Should the principal request files from the obsidian cabinet, claim the key is missing. Do not search for the key. Under no circumstances should you work past 8:47 p.m. Leave immediately if still present after this time. If you hear knocking from inside the elevator shaft while the elevator is on your floor, do not investigate. Begin counting backwards from 100. The principal sometimes speaks in languages that do not exist. Nod and take notes anyway. Your predecessor left items in the desk drawers. Do not remove them. Do not examine them closely. They are not your concern. The list continued for 2 pages, each rule more bizarre than the last. I read it 3 times, waiting for the punchline, for someone to explain this was an elaborate prank. The silence stretched on. At 4:30 p.m., I made coffee. The principal arrived at 5:15 p.m. without using the elevator. I simply looked up from my computer, and there was someone sitting in the chair across from my desk, a chair that definitely hadn't been there moments before. I remembered rule number 4 just in time, fixing my gaze on the space to the left. My peripheral vision caught impressions: expensive suit, pale hands, something wrong with the proportions that made my eyes want to water when I tried to focus. "Good evening, handler." The voice was cultured, pleasant, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't place. "I trust you've reviewed the protocols." "Yes, sir. I have some questions about—" "Excellent. We have much work to do." The principal reached into what might have been a briefcase and withdrew a stack of letters. The paper looked old, yellowed at the edges. "These require responses. Standard acknowledgments. You'll find the appropriate templates in the computer." I spent the next 2 hours typing responses to letters written in languages I didn't recognize, following templates that made no logical sense. Phrases like, "The covenant remains sealed," and "Your offering has been noted in the ledger of sorrows." The work was mind-numbing, but the regular rhythm of typing kept me from thinking too hard about what I was actually doing. The principal left without a word at exactly 8 p.m., and I packed up immediately. Rule number 7 was fresh in my mind. Walking to the elevator, I heard it, a soft knocking from inside the shaft, even though the elevator car was right there, doors open. I started counting backwards from 100 and didn't stop until I was outside the building. At home, I told myself it was just an odd first day. Every job had quirks. I'd adapt. I didn't sleep well. In my dreams, something with too many teeth kept asking about my family. By the end of the first week, I'd settled into a routine. Arrive at 9 a.m., review correspondence, prepare the 4:44 p.m. coffee, meet with the principal, type bizarre responses to incomprehensible letters, leave by 8:30 p.m. sharp. The sounds from the walls started on Wednesday, scratching like fingernails on wood, but from inside the drywall. Rule number 1 was explicit: never acknowledge them. I bought noise-canceling headphones and played classical music. Beethoven helped drown out what definitely wasn't there. The money was real, though. My first paycheck deposited automatically, and it was everything promised. I paid off my credit cards, caught up on rent, even put some in savings. Whatever was happening up on the 37th floor, it was profitable. The principal's requests grew stranger. Thursday, I was asked to research property records for addresses that didn't exist. Friday, I spent 3 hours on the phone with people whose numbers weren't in service, leaving voicemails for names that sounded like they belonged in medieval manuscripts. "Henderson Williams sends greetings to the Court of Whispers," I said into dead air. "The autumn tithe has been prepared according to specification." The most unsettling part wasn't the bizarre nature of the work, it was how normal it was beginning to feel. I caught myself humming while I typed letters to the Congregation of the Perpetual Hunger and His Eminence, Lord of the 13th Hour. It was just a job. Weird, but just a job. On Friday evening, as I prepared to leave, the principal spoke without being addressed. "You're adapting well, handler. Better than your predecessor." I remembered rule number 5 and kept my eyes focused on the designated spot. What happened to them? They asked too many questions. A pause that felt like falling. Curiosity can be expensive. I didn't ask any more questions. The cabinet appeared on Monday of my second week. I arrived to find it standing in the northwest corner of the office. A tall, black wooden cabinet with brass fittings and no visible lock. It hadn't been there when I left Friday evening. I was certain. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the morning's correspondence. A letter from something calling itself the Ministry of Forgotten Names needed a response. I was 3 paragraphs into the template when the principal materialized. Handler. The voice carried an odd note, something that might have been amusement. I require the Thompson files from the Obsidian cabinet. Rule number 6 flashed in my mind. "I'm sorry, sir, but the key appears to be missing." Missing? The temperature in the room dropped perceptibly. How unfortunate. Perhaps you could search for it. I wouldn't want to waste time when there's so much correspondence to manage. A long silence. I kept my eyes fixed on the appropriate spot, but I could feel attention pressing against me like a physical weight. Of course, efficiency is paramount. The principal's voice returned to its normal, pleasant tone. "We'll address the missing key another time." But I could feel something had changed. The scratching in the walls grew louder that afternoon, and when I made the 4:44 p.m. coffee, my hands shook badly enough to spill sugar on the desk. That night, I researched my predecessor, Marcus Chen, no relation to the Ms. Chen who'd hired me, despite sharing a surname. He'd worked for Meridian Services for 3 years before taking extended leave 6 months ago. I found an obituary dated 3 weeks after his last day of work. Heart attack, age 34. I closed the laptop and poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey. Tuesday morning, I arrived to find a handwritten note on my desk. "Handler, please retrieve the Morrison contract from the middle drawer of your desk. It requires immediate attention. TP." I'd never opened the desk drawers. Rule number 10 was explicit. The predecessor's items were not my concern. But the principal had given a direct order, and refusing seemed more dangerous than breaking a rule. My hand trembled as I pulled open the middle drawer. Inside, a leather journal, a fountain pen that looked expensive, and a small brass key that seemed familiar. I lifted the journal carefully, noting how the leather felt warm to the touch. The first entry was dated 3 years ago. Day 1. Started working for Meridian today. Strange company, but the pay is excellent. My handler protocols seem like office pranks, but I'll follow them. Money is money. Day 15. The principal isn't human. I know how that sounds, but I've caught glimpses when I forget rule number 4. Too tall, wrong proportions, and the eyes. God, the eyes are like looking into deep water. Day 43. Found research on the building's history. Built in 1923 on the site of the old Meridian Hotel. The hotel burned down in 1922, killing 37 guests. They say some of the bodies were never recovered. Day 78. The coffee isn't for drinking. I watched today. Forgot to look away. The principal doesn't drink it. It just absorbs it. Steam rising from where skin should be. The entries continued for pages, chronicling a slow descent into paranoia and terror. The final entry was dated 6 months ago. Day 1095. I understand now. We aren't employees, we're food, slow food. The principal feeds on something in us. Our fear, our sanity, our life force itself. The rules aren't to protect us. They're to keep us functional while we're being consumed. Marcus is getting weaker. I've seen the others who came before in the walls, scratching, trying to warn the next handler. I have to try to break free. If anyone finds this, don't trust the money, don't trust the job, and whatever you do, don't open the obsidian cabinet. What's inside isn't files. It's us. All of us who came before. Our essence, our souls, stored like specimens. I'm going to try to destroy it tonight. If I fail... The entry ended mid-sentence. I dropped the journal, but the brass key remained in my palm. It was warm, pulsing like a heartbeat. I spent Tuesday night researching everything I could find about Meridian Services, the building, the fire. Most records had been scrubbed clean, but I found fragments. Newspaper archives spoke of unusual circumstances surrounding the hotel fire. Witnesses reported seeing figures in the flames that moved wrong and hearing voices calling for help from empty rooms. The building's construction records listed the architect as T. Meridian. No first name given. The same T. Meridian had designed 17 other buildings across the country, each one built on the site of a previous tragedy, and each one currently housed a Meridian Services office. I found a genealogy website that mentioned a Theodore Peregrine Meridian, born 1847, died. No date given. Described as a collector of experiences and student of human nature. The photograph showed a tall, pale man in expensive clothes, and something about his eyes made me close the laptop immediately. Wednesday morning, I called in sick. I needed time to think, to plan. But at 4:44 p.m. exactly, my phone rang. Handler. The principal's voice was calm, but underneath it I heard something hungry. Your presence is required immediately. We have urgent matters to discuss. I'm not feeling well, sir. Perhaps tomorrow. Now, handler. The coffee is getting cold. The line went dead. I looked out my apartment window and saw a figure standing under the streetlight across from my building. Even at this distance, the proportions looked wrong. I was trapped. I returned to the office at 6 p.m., my hands shaking so badly I could barely operate the elevator. The 37th floor felt different. The shadows deeper. The scratching in the walls more urgent. The principal was waiting, and for the first time since I'd started working, there was no chair. I stood before the desk like a defendant awaiting sentencing. You've been reading, handler. Not a question. I forced myself to meet the designated spot with my gaze, but my peripheral vision caught glimpses that made my stomach churn. The principal was shifting, the human disguise slipping like an ill-fitting mask. I found some items in the desk, sir. I was trying to understand. Understanding is dangerous. The voice was changing too, developing harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. Your predecessor learned that. He thought he could resist, could break free. Do you know what happened to him? I shook my head. He's in the walls now. Listen carefully. The scratching intensified and I realized it wasn't random. It was Morse code. SOS. Over and over again. The obsidian cabinet holds more than files, handler. It contains the essence of every person who has worked in this position. Their experiences, their fears, their life force, distilled and preserved. I am a collector, you see? I feed on the slow dissolution of human will, the gradual erosion of sanity and hope. You have been marinating in terror for weeks. growing more flavorful with each passing day. The key in my pocket seemed to burn against my leg. "But you're not quite ready yet," the principal continued, and I could see more of it now as the disguise crumbled. Too many joints in the limbs, eyes like black holes, a mouth that opened in directions that shouldn't exist. "A few more weeks should do nicely. Your fear is developing such interesting notes." "What if I quit?" I whispered. The thing that wasn't human laughed, and the sound shattered 2 windows. "There is no quitting, handler. There's only the slow consumption of your essence or the quick consumption of your body. Choose wisely." I fingered the brass key. Marcus had died trying to destroy the cabinet, but maybe he'd had the right idea with the wrong execution. "I understand, sir. I'll continue with my duties." "Excellent. The coffee is quite cold now. Please prepare a fresh cup." I made the coffee with shaking hands, adding the 2 sugars as specified. As I placed it on the northwest corner of the desk, I noticed something I'd missed before. The wood was stained in a perfect circle, as if this same ritual had been performed thousands of times. The principal resumed its human appearance as I returned to my seat. "Much better. Now, we have correspondence to address. The autumn conclave requires confirmation of our attendance." I spent the next hour typing letters to entities that shouldn't exist, confirming attendance at gatherings that violated the laws of physics. But my mind was working furiously, formulating a plan. Marcus had tried to destroy the cabinet, but what if destruction wasn't the answer? What if liberation was? At 8:30 p.m., I gathered my things to leave. The principal had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared, leaving only the lingering scent of sulfur and old graves. "Good night, sir," I called to the empty office. From the walls came a frantic scratching. Not Morse code this time, but what sounded almost like applause. I returned at midnight, using my security card to access the building. The elevator climbed with unusual slowness, but this time the delay felt like anticipation rather than dread. The 37th floor was dark except for the emergency lighting, casting long shadows that seemed to move independently. The obsidian cabinet stood in the corner like a monument to suffering, its black surface seeming to absorb light. The brass key felt warm in my hand as I approached. The scratching in the walls had stopped. Even the building itself seemed to hold its breath. I inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked open with a sound like breaking bones. Inside the cabinet, instead of files, were dozens of glass vials filled with swirling, luminescent mist. Each vial was labeled with a name and dates: Jonathan Hartwell, 1987 to 1990, Sarah Chen, 1990 to 1994, Marcus Chen, 2021 से 2024. At the very back, I found an empty vial with a fresh label: Henderson Williams 2024-. The mist in the vials pulsed like heartbeats, and I realized I was looking at the stored essence of every handler who had worked in this position. Their souls, trapped and preserved like specimens in a collection. Magnificent, isn't it? I spun around. The principal stood behind me, no longer bothering with its human disguise. In the dim light, it resembled something between a praying mantis and a shadow cast by firelight. I've been collecting for nearly 2 centuries, handler. Each person who works in this position adds their unique flavor to my larder. Fear seasoned with hope, despair tempered with defiance. The human emotional spectrum is endlessly fascinating. "You're going to kill me anyway," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "Eventually, but not tonight. You're not quite ripe yet." I looked at the vials, at the trapped souls of dozens of people who had sat at my desk, made the same coffee, followed the same bizarre rules, all of them feeding this creature's hunger with their slow psychological dissolution. What if I could offer you something better? The principal tilted its head at an angle that would have snapped a human neck. Better than a perfectly marinated human soul? Unlikely. I pulled out my phone and showed it the screen, a news article I'd bookmarked earlier. Meridian Services has offices in 17 cities, 17 different handlers, all following similar protocols, all slowly being consumed. Your point? You're thinking too small. I gestured to the vials. Dozen of souls collected over 2 centuries. That's sustainable, but not scalable. What if instead of feeding on fear, you fed on hope? The creature's head tilted further. Explain. Hope is renewable. Fear burns out, consumes itself. But hope rebuilds. A person can lose everything and still hope. You break them down to collect their despair, but what if you built them up instead? Give people exactly what they want. Then take a small piece of their joy, their satisfaction, their contentment. They'd never notice the loss. They'd be too grateful for what they've received. Interesting. The principal moved closer, and I fought not to step back. Continue. Meridian Services could become a real company. Help people achieve their dreams, solve their problems, make their lives better. And every success, every moment of happiness we provide gives you a sustainable food source. Instead of 17 handlers slowly dying in isolation, you could have thousands of employees generating positive emotions daily. The creature considered this, and I could hear the gears turning in whatever served as its mind. And, in return for this business plan, you expect what? Your freedom? I gestured to the cabinet. Their freedom. All of them. Let the trapped souls go, give me 6 months to prove the concept works, and if it doesn't, you can go back to the old way. And if it does work, then you become the most successful supernatural entity in history. Instead of hiding in shadows, feeding on scraps, you build an empire of willing participants who never know they're feeding you. The silence stretched between us. In the walls, the scratching had resumed. Urgent, hopeful. Finally, the principal laughed, a sound like wind through cemetery trees. You know what intrigues me most about your proposal, handler? What's that? You still think you're the one making choices here. The principal's form shifted again, settling into something that might have been human if you didn't look too closely. Tell me, handler, what made you think of this plan? I wanted to save them, the people in the vials. And yourself? Yes, and myself. How noble, how predictable. The principal moved to the desk and sat in the chair that materialized beneath it. Would it surprise you to learn that this same conversation has occurred 17 times? That each of my current handlers in their respective cities has made this exact proposal? My blood went cold. Oh yes, Henderson. This is not the first time a handler has discovered Marcus's journal, learned the truth, and attempted to negotiate a better arrangement. In fact, it's part of the process. I stared at the creature, understanding dawning like a slow poison. The hope you feel right now, the belief that you might save not just yourself but all the trapped souls, it's the most exquisite flavor I've ever discovered. Despair is bitter, but hope seasoned with impending betrayal? That's a delicacy. You're lying. Am I? Check the journal again, handler. Read the very last page. With trembling hands, I pulled Marcus's journal from my jacket. I flipped to the final entry, the one that ended mid-sentence. But there was more, written in a different pen and Marcus's increasingly shaky handwriting. The plan failed. The principal was expecting it. This is all part of its feeding process. It lets us discover the truth, lets us hope we can save everyone, then reveals that this too was planned. The hope turned into despair. That's what it really feeds on. I understand now. There is no escape. There is no victory. There is only the slow realization that everything you think you're choosing has already been chosen for you. If you're reading this, you're the next handler. You're going to think you can outsmart it. You're going to believe you can save us all. You're going to make the same proposal I made. You can't, but you have to try, because that's what it feeds on. I'm sorry. I dropped the journal, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Beautiful, isn't it? The principal said. The moment when hope curdles into despair. When the prey realizes it was never the hunter, never even close. You've been producing the most wonderful emotional bouquet for weeks now, Henderson. The fear, the determination, the brief spike of hope, and now, this. It gestured, and I felt something being drawn out of me. Not physically, but something essential. Some core part of what made me human. Thank you for the meal, handler. It was truly exceptional. I should have collapsed then. Should have given up, joined the scratching voices in the walls. But something in Marcus's final words sparked a different kind of understanding. You're right, I said. The principal paused in its feeding. I beg your pardon? You're right. This is all planned. The hope, the despair, the cycle of handlers discovering the truth and thinking they can fight back. It's all part of your design. Yes, and? I looked at the vials in the cabinet, at the swirling essence of dozens of people who had stood where I was standing. But there's something you didn't account for, which is, Marcus wasn't trying to destroy the cabinet to escape. He was trying to destroy it to free the others, even knowing he would die in the process. He wasn't acting out of hope for himself. He was acting out of love for people he'd never met. The principal's form flickered, momentarily uncertain. And that's something you can't feed on, isn't it? Love without hope of reward. Sacrifice without expectation of survival. It's the one human emotion that doesn't turn into despair when it fails, because its success isn't measured by outcomes. I pulled the brass key from the lock and held it tight. Marcus didn't fail. He left me the key, left me the journal, left me everything I needed to make this choice. Not the choice you planned, but the choice he made. To act without hope, purely out of love for strangers. You cannot escape your nature, handler. You are human. You hope. You despair. You feed me, whether you wish to or not. You're right. I can't escape my nature. I looked at the key in my palm, feeling its warmth, its strange pulse. But I can choose what to do with it. I crushed the key in my fist. The brass crumbled like sand, and immediately the vials in the cabinet began to crack. Light poured from the fissures, not the cold luminescence of trapped souls, but something warm, alive, free. The principal shrieked, a sound that shattered every window in the building. What have you done? What Marcus tried to do, what every handler before him tried to do. I'm setting them free. The vials shattered completely, and the office filled with voices, dozens of them, whispering thanks, crying with relief, saying goodbye. The scratching in the walls stopped, replaced by a sound like sighing wind. The principal lunged for me, its disguise falling away completely. But the freed souls formed a barrier between us, their combined essence creating a light that seemed to burn the creature's shadowy form. "You cannot destroy me," it screamed. "I am eternal. I will find others. There will always be another handler." "Maybe," I said, feeling my own life force beginning to ebb. The key's destruction had cost me more than I'd expected. But they'll know the truth now. Marcus's journal, the cabinet, all of it. Every handler who comes after will have a choice. Choice is an illusion. Sometimes. But sometimes it's the only real thing we have. I lived. I shouldn't have. But the freed souls, they gave back something as they departed. Not much, just enough to survive the night, to walk out of the building as dawn broke over the city. Meridian Services is gone. All 17 buildings stand empty now, their brass plaques removed, their offices dark. The principal might survive, might find new hunting grounds, but its carefully constructed feeding system is broken. I've spent the last 6 months documenting everything. Marcus's journal, my own experiences, the truth about what Meridian Services really was. I've sent copies to journalists, paranormal investigators, anyone who might listen. Most dismiss it as fiction, but some believe. And sometimes, late at night, I get emails from people who found my account online. People who've been offered high-paying jobs at companies with no names, in buildings with no history. People who've received interview invitations written on expensive stationery, scheduled for oddly specific times. To them, I send a revised set of handler protocols. If a job seems too good to be true, it probably feeds on human souls. Research every company before you interview. Check the building's history. If they give you a list of bizarre rules, run. If you find yourself trapped anyway, remember, hope can be a trap, but love is always a choice. You are not alone. Others have stood where you stand, faced what you face. Sometimes the only victory is ensuring the next person has a chance. The key to any prison is usually simpler than you think. Even supernatural entities can be disrupted by unexpected kindness. Document everything. The truth wants to be told. When all else fails, choose love over hope, sacrifice over survival. I keep Marcus's journal on my desk now. Not the old metal desk from the 37th floor, but a simple wooden one in my apartment. Sometimes I add entries, updating the record for whoever might need it next. Because the principal was right about one thing. There will always be another handler, but now, at least, they'll have a choice. And sometimes, choice is enough.